네, 시간이 되었으므로 오늘
Now it's time. Let us begin session 3 and the last session, which is another important session. In session 3, we are going to discuss economic cooperation and development between Korea Mekong region. I would like to invite Darit, the Liber Attaché, Royal Embassy of Cambodia in Seoul, as moderator, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim Dong-yeop. Yep. First of all, I would like to good afternoon, everyone. 안녕하십니까, Manaso Pankapsinida.
Great to meet you all.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be a moderator for this seminar. My name is Darit Toy. On behalf of the Royal Embassy of Cambodia, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking time off your busy schedule to join us today. We hope you will learn it a lot. We have a lineup for you to be fruitful and engaging. In this special occasion, we would like to have 3 presentations about economic cooperation and development. First presentation by Dr. Kwon Yul, Korea Institute for International Economic Policy. He presented about Korea Mekong economic cooperation and the increasing role of ODA in region. The second presenter, Professor Bui Quang Thuyen, Director General, Vietnam Institute of Economics. He presented about Korea-Vietnam economic cooperation with a Vietnamese perspective. And third presenter, Professor Lee Yu-han, Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, Korea. He presented about major cooperation program for Korea Mekong ODA, focusing on the Laos, PDR, and Cambodia. All right. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome the presenter, Mr. Kwon Yul. Please welcome.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you for your kind introduction. It is furthermore meaningful and timely that we had this seminar hosted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it's personally welcoming, and in particular, President Kim Hong-gu and all the staff members prepared this great session. Thank you very much. Today, I would like to talk about Korea-Mekong economic cooperation and the increasing roles of ODA in the region. And I will talk about future measures and the roles. I would like to share my screen with you. Now I am working in Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, and I'm a senior research fellow. And regarding Mekong region, I've been studying development gaps and integration, regional integration in Mekong region. And today I would like to focus on economic cooperation, its status, and any potential role to be increased of ODA in the region by the Republic of Korea. This Mekong region has a great potential with abundant natural resources, and in particular, it has a high-quality labor market. There are about 650 million population in the region and about 243 million people in the labor market of the Mekong region. And thanks to the Industrial Revolution, they are moving forward. And by 2019, there has been an annual growth rate of up to 7%. And not only the Asia, but also the world economy will appreciate and enjoy the development and the advancement of the Mekong region economic growth. And with added momentum from the creation of ASEAN Economic Community, it's estimated that the combined GDP to Mekong countries exceeded $1 trillion in 2020. And all these suggest how important the Mekong region as the economic hub. However, political and economical situations are not really favorable for us, and we have a G2 risk due to the trade dispute between the US and China. The whole world economy is staggering. Centered around Asia, the whole Asian continent has been developed, and we need to minimize some obstacles, and we need to improve some approaches of geopolitical approaches. And here, it's more important to see more roles and initiatives from Mekong countries and ASEAN member states. Let's go by country. For Korea, Mekong countries are great trade partners. And in 2018, we have about $160 billion of a trade with the Mekong region. And even after the outbreak of COVID-19, we still reached 140 billion. And the surplus was about $3.4 million. And Vietnam has reached great amount of investment. And ASEAN and Mekong regional countries are the great source of wealth creation in the future and economic development. In particular, between Korea and Vietnam, we've had a great investment to each other, and then a great volume of trade, and it will be likely to continue. And we, case-wise, it is about 20,000 cases of a trade. And from Vietnam, we invested Vietnam in about $4.5 billion, a little less in Thailand, and in Laos, maybe in $70 million that we plan to further invest. In particular, in Vietnam, in 1992, we first officially had a diplomatic tie, and Vietnam was the very first step for Korea to enter. And that's also when I visited Vietnam for the first time in 1992. It has been already 30 years since then. And I just wish that I had more time to talk about the history since then, but it is personally great to see the great development of the diplomatic ties between Korea and Vietnam. After the financial crisis in 1998, we created an ASEAN Vision Group to create economic community. Korean ASEAN FTA has been signed since then. And as a delegation of Korea ASEAN FTA, I also participated. And ASEAN +6 was also the meeting that I participated, and I didn't mention about India, but we drastically reached to the conclusion, and that became a new mega FTA for Korea. And I was in the part of the negotiation, and I am fully proud of my role there. So Vietnam is one of the most important trading partners with Korea, and after the diplomatic tie in 1992, I hope to see more roles by Vietnam in the region of Mekong. Since then, in August 2001, President Tran Duc Long visited Korea to establish a comprehensive cooperative partnership. And recently, President Moon Jae-in also visited to Vietnam in March 2018, which resulted in the bilateral relations being further strengthened, a strategic cooperative partnership. And some discussions were made in 2018 to boost some components industry. So centered around Vietnam, we have a lot of industries interested in coming into this area, this region. Supporting industries are important as an infrastructure, and that can also help the economic development of Vietnam. Otherwise, they will have difficulties to advance their industries further. So we have been actively supporting Vietnamese initiatives, and also for sustainability, we want to help Vietnam. Otherwise, we cannot solve common issues and problems. So that is why we are actively helping the components industries as the infrastructure in Vietnam, and that can become a basic framework for the advancement of their industries. Vietnam is one of the 4 major training partners for Korea. And as the ties of friendship and cooperation continues to grow, Korea has become the 5th largest trading partner for Vietnam. The mutual dependency between the two nations has grown deeper as Korea has become the largest investor in Vietnam. Together with Vietnam's ascensions to the WTO in 2007. And we talked about Korea-Vietnam FTA, Korea-ASEAN FTA, and recently we are reviewing Korea-Cambodia FTA. So I'm sure the feasibility study will be done by the end of this year, and then we will expect to see the conclusion of the Korea-Cambodia FTA. So as an important investment and trading partner, Korea and Vietnam have become more amicable. We are working on China +1, and that one will be mainly covered by Vietnam. In 2007, Vietnam joined WTO and started to play its role in the international arena. If you look at the global value chain, after 2010, China transferred their industry from labor intensive to knowledge and more technology intensive, and that includes components industries, and Vietnam are actually somehow more advanced compared to Malaysia and Thailand. So we have to be careful. Maybe Malaysia will fall into or remain as a middle power and can't advance further unless they want to renovate their industries in IT and more value-added industries, and they will be under great pressure by China. Korea and ASEAN, especially Mekong partner countries, need to find a way to mutually nurture such industries. In particular, as I mentioned, component industries are the key industries that we can seek some measures from. FTA, yes, it's important to sign, but it's also important to review more in detail regarding where we can cooperate. Let's look at Thailand. After COVID-19, the global value chain has been reshuffled. And Thailand used to show more strength. Most of the trade is in industry and some consumer goods such as steel, memory, petrochemical, machinery, electronic device parts, and cosmetics. But unless further transformation, they might fall into some trap as well, especially after COVID-19. They are hit hard. Still, Thailand has great potentials, and regarding the trade relations with Korea, Thailand will be a great partner in the area of memory chip, petrochemical, electronic device parts. And there are many more areas that Korea and Thailand can pursue while diversifying the trade and economic cooperation. In terms of Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, we can utilize the cheap but good quality of labor. The trade has really been focused on clothing, sewing, construction equipment, and agricultural food. In particular, these three countries were underdeveloped among the ASEAN countries, which Korea can help with the economic infrastructure and with more ODA provided by Korean government. So at the moment, in the Mekong region, in Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, we have been actively sharing our economic development path with them. And the major source to support is, of course, ODA. Each year, we provide about $170 million to Vietnam, as well as Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, probably 80 million. Cambodia has received about $70 million. So the total of about $400 to $500 million have been invested to Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar to support their sustainability and the economic development. And their independency will also contribute to Korean economic development as a great economic and trade partner. However, as mentioned before, the whole world's economy is not favorable for anybody in the world. And we're facing a rise in global protectionism. And with RCEP, regional supply chain is on the highlight to be restructured. President Trump used to say America first. And even in Biden's administration, G2 risk will be more likely to continue. Since the first Korean Mekong Summit in 2019, Korea and Mekong countries have strengthened their cooperative efforts. There are a lot of joint projects along the Mekong River. Langchang Mekong Cooperation is a good example as a biannual event. Japan, US are also pursuing different cooperative projects, and we need to work along with these other partners in the region as genuine partners. And there should be a joint global effort on that. And these were the overview of the economic cooperation of Mekong countries. And now I want to talk about more detailed development cooperation measures. Our ODA strategy at the moment is done mostly by around ASEAN countries. There were 26 priority countries for the ODA. Now it's expanded to 26. The two addition was the Philippines and Indonesia, but basically 4 to 5 countries are from ASEAN countries, and we also call it CLMV, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. And these CLMV countries are the greatest recipient of a Korean ODA and of the highest priority from Korea's perspective. And we want to reduce the gap between the ASEAN member states and to add momentum to economic integration. It was about 3.7 trillion won of ODA. Bilateral wise, it was about $2 billion US. And among $2 billion, ASEAN and Mekong countries received about $500 and $600 million from Korea's ODA. And there will be $3 billion each year that Korea will provide to the Mekong countries and ASEAN member states. Unlike China and Japan, we are focusing on a private partnership, and with the seed money, we would like to establish the mid to long-term economic cooperation to respond these Mekong countries' economic cooperation move. And if we can put this along with the investment movement, it will be more efficient. So far, with the various ways, we have been helping and sharing with Mekong countries through KOICA and EDCF. But the key here is to reduce the development gap between ASEAN member states. ASEAN's development will directly lead to the peace and prosperity of Asia. So once we have a deepened development gap between ASEAN member states, it's not favorable and ideal. And in particular, it's important to focus on supporting CLMV countries in order to realize that economic integration by adding momentum of Korea's ODA. So among the entire ASEAN countries may not need Korea's ODA. Rather, it's important to select priority countries. This is a simple statistics that I would like to share. ODA consists of a grant and loan. grant is provided in the form of a technological cooperation by KOICA and other ministry of a Korean government. If you look at the whole volume, it was about $400 million in 2018, and it's increased up to $500 million by 2020. This number is slightly different as they are the net value, but if you think about EDCF loan, it's about $70 million. So as you can see, Cambodia in 2020 achieved 90 million, followed by Laos about 30 million, and Myanmar is also seen as an important grant and loan partner to be recipient. And there are a lot to improve. But probably we have to wait until the political stability is realized in Myanmar. In Vietnam, they almost had $100 million. In 2016, the volume was about $200 million, and it has decreased a bit. And as of net value, it was about 530 million. Due to outbreak of COVID-19, it's very difficult to carry out a grant and a loan, but still we are working on our exchanges through disinfection supplies and the quarantine model sharing. As mentioned earlier, Korea is maintaining close ties with Vietnam from both economic and diplomatic perspectives. And Vietnam is one of the biggest major cooperation partner with the highest priority and a major recipient of a Korean ODA. Eventually, it should contribute to ASEAN integration. And we need to focus on our budget and the asset to some strategic partners like Vietnam. You can see the ASEAN's role is furthermore important to realize that economic integration and the development of the Mekong region. Korean government, as you are well aware, is carrying out a new sovereign policy, and it has the goal of embracing the vision of a people-centered community of peace and prosperity. And this policy proposes a detailed strategy grounded in 3 pillars. People to people. Some trade and investment opportunities can contribute to this goal of a new southern policies. Eventually, ASEAN's connectivity and economic integration can be realized, and that's something that Moon Jae-in administration is working on. Because we don't have a luxury of time, I will briefly mention the next slides. I mentioned about 3P as the biggest values of new southern policies, and we do have the 4 perspectives and visions of new southern policy plus, and that includes people-centeredness, inclusive growth, integrated partnership, and here it includes openness and transparency. ASEAN is in the same shoe as Korea is. And rather than forcing to choose something, we can encourage autonomy of their countries, and that is why ASEAN and Mekong countries need to act as a strategic partner of a Korean government. Through integrated partnership, we aim to achieve harmonious partnership in keeping with the principles of openness, tolerance, and transparency. And we've had a lot of summit accordingly. And once we establish the cooperative channels and have more summit, such as the one we had in Busan, we can move forward. However, COVID-19 hinders our plans and ambitious goal. So far, Korea and ASEAN countries have been exemplary countries to tackle COVID-19 regarding disinfection, and the K quarantine model was shared among these ASEAN countries, and we need to establish the more basic framework to share further. And I talked about 3P, 4 visions, and along with them, we also have 7 initiatives of a new Southern Policy Plus. Seeking creative and feasible measures to respond to changes in the post-COVID era, we have these 7 initiatives. First, combating COVID-19 and beyond and post-COVID-19. People-centered education, gaining a deeper mutual understanding through culture. Sustainable economy together. And the 5th one is enhancing quality of life through infrastructure development and developing industries with innovative technology. Finally, shaping a community of a greater safe and peace against any non-conventional security. And human security has been also gaining more attention that we want to focus on. So in summary, New Southern Policy Plus seeks to enhance the long-term and sustainable cooperative partnership to improve New Southern Policy vision of people-centered community of peace and prosperity. Based on people-to-people, we can realize mutual development and peace and prosperity. And that's our goal and task. And balance the diplomacy that ASEAN countries can be further developed in cooperation and discussion with the Biden administration. And through these dialogues, the world will realize how important this region of ASEAN and Mekong. RCEP also needs to be rectified by the Korean National Assembly. But after that, we will raise another new horizon of diplomacy with the Mekong region. And once we restructure the supply chain, we need to focus more on regional value chain. And after the restructuring, regional issues and some development gaps will be realized depending on how we work and how much we work with these Mekong country partners. Openness needs to be expand, and we need to be more inclusive, and we need to realize more transparency, and such partnership based on these values will further develop the relations between Korea and Mekong region. For last 30 years, we've established this cooperative basis. So for the next 30 years, will be more beneficial and enjoying the establishment that we made with Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Myanmar, and other ASEAN member states to realize a sustainable future for both Korea and Mekong region. That wraps up my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwon Yu, for the interesting presentation about Korea Mekong in terms of economic and expansion of sustainability of development in the region, such as trade, investment, infrastructure, FTA with ASEAN, and bilateral. Honestly, I expect to see the conclusion of Cambodia FTA in August, as I heard and I get information from the party concerned. Yep. Moving right along, it is now my pleasure to introduce our next presentation. Professor Bui Quang Thuan, Director General, Vietnam Institute of Economics. We would like to have a presentation about Korea-Vietnam economic cooperation with the Vietnam perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Bui Quang Thuan. Yeah, Professor, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for me to be a part of the conference. We, as a team of the two people, myself and Dr. Minh Lệ Võ from Institute of World Economics and Politics, we would like to share some thought about the economic cooperation between Vietnam and Korea and Vietnamese perspectives. So let me share my presentation. Yes. Okay. Yes, we would like to talk about the two parts. First is on the situation, the current situation of the trade relation between Vietnam and Korea, and the second is on investment relation between the two, and the perspective from the Vietnamese perspectives. So that have some introduction. Vietnam started the renovation or đổi mới policy in 1986, and the process of integration into the world began. And along with this process, official diplomatic relation with Korea were established in 1992, and we consider Korea, South Korea, as one of the most successful case, or often known as a miracle on the Han River. And this is a very good example for the late country, like a developing country like Vietnam, to learn and to follow. And during the period of 1962 to 1992, so almost 30 years, Korea achieved an average on economic growth rate of more than 10%, which is very, very high. And we tried our best to follow, but the 7 and 7.5% is already high. But by that, Korea achieved 10%. So this is a miracle. And that is why Korea entered the group of OECD countries. And I think this is the biggest achievement, and this is the very good example for Vietnam to follow. And that is why we consider Korea as the one of the very strategic and key partner in trade and investment, and that is why we open the economic relationship and enforce all the law and the legal framework to promote the relationship. Because of so let me remind some milestone event. So after the establishment of diplomatic relations between two countries in 1992, in 2001, the two countries agree on comprehensive cooperation partnership towards the 21st century. In 2009, the two countries agreed to sign strategic cooperative partnership, and especially in 2015, the two countries signed the FTA, which is the very good opportunity for two countries to promote trade and investment. So because of the good relationship of economic cooperation, we can see in here the increasing growth rate of trade. You can see the export and import here. Vietnam, both export and import has a very high increase rate, and up to 2020, the two-way trade value already up to 67 billion US dollar. And in terms of economic, export growth rate and import growth rate, you can see after FTA signed in 2015, the rate is very high, up to 27 for export and 16% for import. And this ratio is continue to be high up until 2019. Except the case of 2020, we suffered the COVID-19. So you can see the downturn of trade is the downturn trending all over the world. So it is not surprising. But up until 2019, the ratio is still very high. In terms of the trade partner, Dr. Oda Flows also already mentioned about the position of Vietnam in the trade relationship. Vietnam ranked fourth in terms of export market after the Korea ranked fourth. So we export most to USA, and then China, and Japan, and then Korea. The Korea is fourth. In terms of import, we import most from China, and the second from Korea, mostly from the market to have a supply of manufacturing industry, like the inputs for manufacturing products. So Korea is very, very important trade partner. Korea actually, Korea also consider Vietnam is a very important trade partner. You can see here Vietnam ranked third in terms of export markets, and in terms of import markets, Vietnam ranked fourth after China, USA, and Japan and Germany. So you can see both the two-way, Korea and Vietnam, are the key partners of each other. So let's see the structure of import and export. In terms of import, what we import from Korea, we import mostly the computer and electrical products, spare part and component. The second is the telephone, mobile phone, and spare part. The third is machine, equipment, tools, and instruments, and etc. In terms of export, we export mostly the textile and garment, about 15%, and then the machine, computer, electrical products, and the machine, equipment, and tools and instruments. The structure of trade, we can see in here the ratio of telephone, mobile phone, and spare part is a very high ratio. It's 47% of the import, the total import. So we import from Korea, mostly telephone, mobile phone, and spare part. And the second position is computer, electrical products is 27%. And next, plastic and machine equipment, tools, instrument in about 17 and 16%. In terms of export, we also, we export telephone, mobile phone the most, computer, electrical products, spare part the second, and textiles, garment is the third. Okay, in terms of FDI, Korea is always among the top Korea, the country to have FDI in Vietnam. In total, you can see here, Korea is number one. If we have accumulated the number up until the December 2020, the number of projects from Korea is nearly 9,000, and with a registered investment is about 70 billion US dollars. So the number one, and the number two is Japan, and a little bit far behind, 60 billion US dollars. And next is Singapore, and the fourth is Taiwan, and the fifth is Hong Kong, China. You can see here the investment a little bit downsizing because of COVID-19 right in here. But I believe after we recover after the COVID-19, we believe very strongly that the trend will be recovered strongly. There are some major Korean projects in Vietnam, mostly the Samsung and LG. You can see that the Samsung in Vietnam is the most and the largest company, even in comparison with the state-owned enterprises. We can see, we can say that the Samsung now is very, very important for Vietnam to keep the trade balance. Without Samsung, the trade of Vietnam can be deficit, right? But with Samsung, the picture changes to surplus. And Samsung has already invested about more than 17 billion US dollars in Vietnam, and consider Vietnam as the largest base outside of Korea. So let me talk a little bit about Samsung. Samsung Electronics entered Vietnam in 1995, and the first large-scale mobile phone factory was established in 2008, and the big million, the 2016, the 15 billion US dollar invest in Vietnam to build four subsidy. Samsung now has about 70 billion US dollars of turnover, and with a net profit of about 4.8 billion US dollars. So which is very significant. And the four its subsidiary is Samsung Display Vietnam, specializing in manufacturing screen. And the second one is Samsung Electronic Vietnam, specializing in manufacturing electronic equipment. The third one is Samsung Electronic Vietnam Thái Nguyên, SEVT. This one is the largest, specializing in manufacturing telecommunication and equipment. And the fourth is Samsung Electronic in Ho Chi Minh City, specializing in manufacturing and trading electronic equipment. So in comparison with the largest enterprises that are state-owned enterprises of Vietnam, which is the oil and gas group, PVN, and the electricity of Vietnam, EVN. Samsung revenue last year was 2.1 times higher than PVN and 4 times higher than EVN. And if we compare to GDP, then the Samsung turnover equivalent to 26% of the whole country GDP. So you can see the size of Samsung and in Vietnam market, which is very significant. And we consider Samsung is one of the most successful case of foreign investment attraction, and we continue to consider is the showcase to going forward. So in terms of contribution, Samsung now has one. I mean, in up to 2015 and 2016, Samsung has contribution about 130 million, which is still quite modest, but at least it's some contribution. And to Bắc Ninh province, 88 million, which is quite significant. And Samsung revenue equivalent to 26, like I said, 76% of GDP, and especially Samsung generate about 140,000 jobs, and this help transferring farmer from rural area to the industrial park and industrial zones. But yes, in terms of local content, Samsung, according to a report, already has a local content about more than 50%, which is quite considerable. And Vietnam in the beginning, about 2010, just some vendor of the first level, but by 2016, 17, already more than 200 vendor that supplies the input for Samsung. So the achievement and contribution of Samsung can be seen in the different, not only just the vendor, but also the, in terms of finance and banking, service, security, transportation, logistics, and other things. So we can see spillover effect can happen here in the case of Samsung. Of course, with the technology transfer, it is still quite limited. It's so far still limited to exhibition, consultancy, training program. But what we expect more from Samsung is R&D, because we will continue to push forward the changing the pattern of growth from the wide base to the intensive base, based on the technology and the innovation. Then the R&D is what we expect the most. That is why the capital export grow national provincial budgets as still limitation with the Samsung. For example, the Samsung long-term commitment, it is still not quite sure whether Samsung continue to be based in here for long term, because if the increasing trend of wage, then the advantage of the low wage, the low cost of labor is still continue to be exhausted, as well as unsustainability of capital is so unsure, and the ratio of local content as well as the technology transfer is still limited. So it is, I think, Vietnam should have some policy to promote, to encourage Samsung as well as other FDI investor to increase more local content and technology transfer. Another thing is small contribution to the budget. So far, Samsung is still has enjoyed the tax policy. So that is why the contribution to the budget is still limited. But with the spillover effect, with the influence of the supply chain, we expect the Samsung will help to increase more contribution. One aspect more in terms of limitation is the worker working for Samsung, mostly low skill. You can see undergraduates just account for about 4%, and mostly concentrated in assembling activity, and not on the more sophisticated steps. And also gender inequality. The workers are mostly female and under 30 years old, and more than 30 years old, the worker can be not used at any time. So it is also a problem. And the vendor, of course, the vendor increasing, but according to us, is still, this number is still limited. And they did show that there's a weak connection between FDI vendor and the Vietnamese enterprises because of the low capacity of the Vietnamese partner, as well as high standard of Samsung and the investors like that. Of course, limitation in technology transfer. In fact, Samsung now in the process of development of a new R&D center located in Hanoi. But from now up to the opening the R&D center, we still see the limitation in technology transfer. So from the Vietnamese prospect, we see that there's a very good potential for Vietnam and South Korea to continue to improve the good relationship and economic cooperation. We see that Korea already has a new southern policy and consider the Mekong countries, including Vietnam, is a good and strategic partner. So we very happy to hear that. And from the Vietnamese prospect, we now in the process of changing the model of growth, and we continue to push further the renovation and continue to open the economy. Vietnam now enjoys the open economy, which is the ratio of export and import is about 200% of the GDP, and we enjoy the stability of the in society. So the investment and business environment is very good and very attractive for investors. So we continue to do that, and we continue to put further the preferential business environment for foreign investor. Especially we see this a very good opportunity for Vietnam in terms of the population. Vietnam now enjoys the golden structure of a population. The golden structure of population, that means two person working can bury one person independent. It is a structure, it in the opposite of Japan, right? Japan, one person working can bury burden of two independent. So with this structure, I think it is very good for Vietnam to have opportunity to take advantage of populations, the golden structure population, to involve much in the fourth industrialized revolution, right? And the young generation of Vietnam can be very dynamic and can accessible to new technology and innovation. So I think this is very good for Vietnam in terms of opportunity. Especially Vietnam will now also have a great effort in the, designing a new strategy that take into account the green sector and green field, green area, and innovation in the region. The strategy developed in the new the recent party congress. We consider we already have a new development strategy that based on technology and innovation. Although Vietnam is not up to that level, but because we remember that there are three stages of development. The first is just resource allocation, resource efficiency. The second is technical efficiency, and the next one, the third, is innovation efficiency. So up to the innovation efficiency, we need to be like the OECD per capita income. But with 4.0 revolution, industrial revolution, I think there is opportunity for the low income level country like Vietnam and developing country with middle income and low income can have opportunity to catch up with the advanced countries. So I think innovation technology that we specify as a key pillar for the next period is very important for Vietnam to grow. Especially, we already in the process of producing the new strategy of green growth. I myself involved in this the team to develop the green growth strategy for Vietnam in the period of 2001 and 2021, 2030, and with vision to 2050. So I think Korea is one of the good example that we follow when we developing this green growth strategy for Vietnam. And of course, now we talk very much about the digital and digitalization and digital transformation. And Vietnam consider digital transformation is as one of the key pillar for Vietnam to catch up with other countries in the region. And of course, with complementary trade structure between the two countries, we can see that there's a lot of room for Vietnam and Korea to have further economic cooperation. So this is the prospect we see, and to conclude, we see that with the new context of development, and we are lucky in the very dynamic region like Mekong and ASEAN, and with very good relationship with partner like Korea, Japan, and other big country. We see this good potential for Vietnam to keep going and to open and to develop further with the new strategy that is based on technology, innovation, digital transformation, and etc. And we see that the 10th anniversary of Korea-Mekong Cooperation and the South Korean New Southern Policy and Vietnam-Korea FTA as the key catalyst for this transformation in the future. So that is why we very much believe in the bright future of Vietnam-Korea relationship. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Bùi Quang Tuấn, for your intervention about Vietnam economic trade, foreign direct investment, and not only the project with Korean, but also the limitation. So, all right, we are moving forward to our last presenter, and I have my great honor to introduce.
오늘 마지막 발표자로서 한국 외대의 이요한 교수님을 소개하게 되어 영광스럽게 생각합니다.
He will presentation about major cooperation program for Korea-Mekong ODA, focusing on the Laos PDO and Cambodia. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcome Professor Lee Yu-han. Thank you. I think you have 20 minutes. Thank you.
네, 네, 반갑습니다.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
주제를 발표할 이요한입니다.
My name is 이요한.
한국에 대해 메콩 ODA.
Today, I would like to talk about major cooperation program for ROK's Mekong ODA. In particular, I want to focus on the Laos and Cambodia.
우선 이제 한국의 그 ODA 그 예산 추이를 좀
First,
보시는데
Korea's ODA volume by year.
2010년에
In 2010,
가입을 하게 되었고요.
we joined OECD DAC,
그 ODA 예산이 한 11억 불 정도
and it was about 1.1 billion dollars that Korea was able to provide as ODA.
를 보이고 있고
And it has shown the steady growth, and until 2019, it reached up to 2.5 billion, which is over twofold compared to the beginning of the ODA. Bilateral ODA takes up about 75% of the entire ODA. 23 to 24% goes to the multilateral ODA. And among the entire gross net income, you can see the rate. And it started from 0.12, and it has steadily grew up to 0.15. For last couple of years, Korea was the country who quickly developed the ODA volume according to ODA DAC. And between 2011 to 2010 and 2018, we increased about 11.9%, and we had a greatest increase. And the average of DAC is only 2.4%. So that means Korea's annual growth rate of ODA is almost 5 times compared to the average of all the DAC countries. From 2021 to 2025, Republic of Korea and Mekong has a plan of actions for the second phase. First, we started the Mekong-ROK Summit since 2019, and we agreed to have annual Mekong-ROK Summit each year. Also, we agreed to expand and develop the Mekong-ROK Cooperation Fund through the Mekong Institute located in Thailand. And the budget is expected to grow from 1 million to $3 million. Both parties also agreed to continue full cooperation with the Mekong-ROK Business Council. According to new Southern policy, you may remember 3P, and based on these 3P, we have been expanding the partnership for people, prosperity, and peace. For people for inclusive society, we focused on the culture, tourism, and human resources development. For prosperity by sharing experience, we agreed to focus on agriculture, rural development, infrastructure, and ICT. For peace, for sustainable development, we agreed to focus on environment and non-traditional security challenges. In 2019, we had the first Mekong-ROK Summit in 2019 in Busan, and we announced the Mekong-ROK vision. We've signed MOU in 3 fields of agriculture, ICT, and startups and innovation. EDCF stands for Economic Development Cooperation Fund, and it's more like a paid loan, and we decided to input about $500 million for the Mekong-ROK Corporation. This is the ROK Mekong ODA system. And I mentioned about EDCF, and then COICA usually provides grant in order to develop infrastructure, human resources, and other loans, and then it will go into the Mekong region. rather than having direct investment from Korean government, we can think of some help from Korean government, but also Laos and Cambodia do not have favorable conditions for the private investment due to their social system. However, ODA can play a bigger role in those countries of Cambodia and Laos due to the characteristics of their social system. And Dr. Kwon Yul mentioned about priority partner countries, and I want to re-emphasize. We have 11 Asian countries in the Mekong region. Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia are the Mekong countries on the list of a priority partner. Next shows the ROK's ODA top 10 by 2020. We have Vietnam, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. All these Mekong countries are on the top 10 list of ROK ODA. Even after outbreak of COVID-19, we are seeking ways to restructure our ODA, and building trust is the key element in order to enhance transparency, resilience, unity, and safe together. And these are our emphasis. In this regard, we are utilizing ODA for humanitarian assistance, health and quarantine cooperation for key countries, and here, when I say key countries, not only Korea, but most donor countries through cooperation. Also, due to COVID-19, most countries are suffering from economic collapse. The same goes to Cambodia and Laos. So they need a support for responding to economic and social impacts, and that's our goal. And these are the countries who are supposed to be beneficiary. This shows the ROK's ODA for Mekong region by 2021. We have grant and loan for Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The total grant amounts $164 million. For loan, accumulated volume will be $224 million. We still have more loan than the grant. The total ODA is about $388 million. Next slide is about ODA sectors for new sovereign policies. By 2021, programs vary from digital partnership, higher education, rural development, urban development, and transportation. And the countries can include these countries, as you see, and the yellow highlighted countries are from Mekong region. Digital partnership includes all 5 Mekong region countries. For higher education, we have Myanmar, Vietnam, and Cambodia. For rural development, we have 4 countries from Mekong region. For urban development, we have Laos and Vietnam. For transportation, we have Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Each project has the number, and you can refer to the amount of the ODA for each program of the ODA for these Mekong countries. Next, ROK's ODA flows to Laos. In 2015, the ODA was about $87 million, and the total amount between 2015 and 2019 is about $300 million. The next slide shows the COVID-19 and Republic of Korea's contributions depending on the countries. For Laos, as Korea's ODA, we established the Mother and Children Hospital in Laos. So we've been providing preventive goods, and also medical and quarantine supplies are provided through ROK's ODA. For Cambodia as well, we are providing quarantine supplies, diagnosis kit for COVID-19, and also we try to hand over the knowledge regarding walkthrough system for diagnosis. Laos is one of a priority cooperation countries, and it's called the CPS. It's a report to review the achievement. Between 2016 and 2020, we had 4 priority cooperation areas for Laos. First, water management and health issues. Second, energy. Third, education. Fourth, rural development. And these are the cooperation areas we have been doing with Laos. This was a dialogue held on December 3rd called ROK Laos Policy Dialogue. It's about ODA policy to share together, and it was the online dialogue. One of the key topics was development cooperation to COVID-19 and support in capability building to overcome COVID-19. And both nations discussed how Korea can help with Laos. We have some main ODA programs specifically customized for Laos. Every year, Korean government announced the national implementation plan of ODA, and these are what was introduced by the government. And we have a list of projects, but I just want to highlight a few that may interest you. In terms of water management and health, we have various projects, as you can see here. Korean Meteorological Administration plans to have a project of integrated typhoon monitoring and forecasting platform between 2020 and 2023 with a budget of $3 million. As health issue has become one of the most important issues around the globe, Ministry of Health and Welfare of the Republic of Korea plans to have a project regarding diagnosis and quarantine system building project for communicable disease control with a budget of $350 million. And it already started from 2019. Another project by Ministry of Health and Welfare is health insurance establishment of an examination request system and capacity building project between 2021 and 2025. KOICA also plans to have the wastewater treatment capacity building project with a budget of $6 million between 2019 and 2024. Ministry of Finance and Planning has a plan for the project of Champasak and Saraban province water supply with a budget of $450. Next area is for energy and rural development. And KOICA has a plan for establishment of effective water resources management system, and with the budget of a big volume of about $11 million. Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs is highly interested in the irrigation technology, and they have a plan to establish irrigation technology education center with the budget of $6.2 million. Also, the ministry is highly interested in supporting project for improving the utilization of a local agreement machinery with a budget of $3.5 million between 2020 and 2023. Next, our case ODA flows to Cambodia. We also have a lot of ODA flowing into Cambodia between 2015 to 2019. You can see the figure, and the total figure for last 5 years was about 315 million ODA into Cambodia. We also have a CPS report for Cambodia between 2016 and 2020. The priority cooperation areas include the transportation, water management, education, and regional development. Accordingly, Cambodian Authority and the Republic of Korean government had a dialogue regarding ODA policies on March 24, 2022, in order to promote ODA program even under COVID-19. In Cambodia, transportation is furthermore important. Therefore, the Korean Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transportation has a master plan of establishment for intelligent transportation system. Ministry of Economy and Planning and Finance of Republic of Korea has 2 projects related to climate change and the local road improvement. Regarding water management and health, we have a Ministry of Employment and Labor of the Republic of Korea under the project called the Policy Advice on Improving Legal System in the Industrial Safety. Also, Korean Meteorological Administration wants to establish automatic weather observation system. And they also want to construct a receive analysis system for Cheollean Satellite 2A. Ministry of Health and Welfare of the Republic of Korea plans to have a project of consulting services for operation management of National Medical School Hospital. Another project is called Integrated Maternal and Child Health Promotion Project. Last but not least, to sum up, Korea has provided a lot of ODA programs in a great volume, which sometimes give us some challenges and highly affect Cambodia and Laos. However, Korea ROK Mekong vision and some policies of Korean government needed some advice, then which I would like to suggest. I just wish that the Korean government implements these projects in more effective manners. And to do so, they can have country-specific or somehow customized strategies. So those who actually carry out these projects or who plan these projects can be more clear about what they are doing in terms of ODA to Cambodia and Laos. Also, a lot of policies and visions are available for these policymakers, and they look splendid on the surface. However, often they lack pragmatic strategies, and these plans and projects are rather vague. So I believe that these strategies need to be more in detail. Last but not least, President Moon Jae-in will be in office until next year, and he's been active in terms of ROK Mekong Corporation. But after his term next year, we have to think about continuity and consistency beyond and after Moon Jae-in's administration. We have to review what variables could happen in the future. And even if there are some power changes in the Korean government, we still need to have a consistency and continuity in terms of the ROK Mekong Corporation with our strong commitment and the secured budget. And that's something that we have to keep an eye on. That wraps up my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee Yu-han. And we really great to see the ODA provided from Korea for development in diversified sector, prosperity, and harmonized coexistence with Korea. So now we come to the question and answer session. Please mention your name and your origin, and please welcome the question. Question, please. Okay.
네, 부산 외대 김동엽입니다.
I'm Professor Kim Dong-hyuk of BUFS. My question goes to Dr. Kwon Yul.
저희가 이제 신남방 정책을 추진하면서
As we implement new Southern policy, in terms of economic policies, we are concentrated on Vietnam. So some say that once as Myanmar opens up, Myanmar could be a post-Vietnam cooperation destination. That was our prior expectations. The new Southern Policy Plus should not be so concentrated on Mekong, but expanded to other regions. And do you have any take on this to do so? Thank you.
네, 그러면 뭐 간단히 말씀드리겠습니다.
Let me answer by elaborating what I think.
지금 사실상 아세안과의 교역의 한 40%,
Probably 40% of the entire trade with ASEAN is from the relations with Vietnam.
집중을 해가지고
And by focusing on this region, we want to lower the cost by restructuring value chain and supply chain. However,
뭐 인도네시아나 뭐 태국,
in Indonesia, Thailand, and other Mekong Basin countries
협력 기반을
also need to secure more cooperation with Korean government by diversifying the channels, in particular in Vietnam.
정부 시절에는
During Trump administration, it was regarded as a currency fraud country, and somehow Vietnam was stigmatized to be related to China. And Vietnam had difficulties during the Trump administration. Fortunately, after Biden took office, Vietnam went under the observatory category of the countries, but it was once highlighted to review the role of Vietnam in the global stage. And what we have to consider for new Southern Policy Plus, in the course of restructuring supply chain, Mexico, Canada, and US already show some examples of restructuring supply chain. So we can learn something from there to apply some implications to Mekong countries, as well as Vietnam and Asian region. Rather than considering simply labor-intensified industries, we can think of some new industries and new eras regarding ICT, climate change, and supporting industries, such as components industries, can be reviewed to change and restructure our industry structure that is currently dependent on China. And so far, we've had a massive investment by one or two or a few conglomerates into Vietnam, but we need to also wisely utilize the cheap labor in the Mekong countries. So overall, it's important to allocate some roles that individual countries can do better than others. So through this job allocation scheme, each country can pull out their driving forces to cooperate with the Korean government along with the Korean companies so that we can help each and every Korean companies in need. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, please question.
안녕하세요. 부산의대 홍문숙입니다. 저도 이제 권율 박사님께 질문이 있는데요. 아무래도 정책 단위의 여러 가지 자문 활동도 많이 하시다 보니까 좀 제 궁금증을 좀 해소해 주실 수 있지 않으실까 하는 생각이 드는데요. 제목에서 제시해 주신 것처럼 경제협력 단위의 예산들과 경제협력의 고유의 역할과 영향력들이 있을 것 같고요. 공적개발 원조 안에서도 이 차관과 무상 원조 안에서의 또 경제협력 부분이 있을 것 같은데요. 이런 부분에 있어서 메콩 지역 안에서 뭐 조합을 한다든지 연계를 한다든지 이런 가능성들을 볼 수 있을지 그런 새로운 뭐 리저널
Do you see some sub-regional instrument?
박사님 어떻게 생각하시는지
Do you have a take on this? If we can integrate ODA projects into the Mekong region? Thank you.
저한테 질문하실 건가요?
So that question goes to me.
못 들었는데
I didn't quite understand the first part. Can you elaborate the first part?
경제협력이라고 하는
When you say economic cooperation,
경제협력만의 독특하고 중요한
there must be some kind of unique rules and characteristics of economic cooperation, but ODA also has their own systems.
공적개발 원조 안에서
And within ODA, we have different mechanisms between grant and loan. And recently, within grant, there are some discussions that economic cooperation is important. So as far as I understand, basically economic education goes into any category, but I'm quite confused because it must have a different schemes and structure in the system, depending on if it's grant or loan. Okay, as you mentioned, our ODA volume is about 3.7 trillion won. By 2030, it will be expanded up to 6 trillion won, and it will be almost a double from now. EDCF and some COICA ODA are diversified in an organized manner. As Professor Lioan also mentioned, we have massive projects, but that also means that we do not have a great impact on individual projects. And if you think about seed money of the project, it could be catalyst to boost ODA. However, to secure some growth base, there should be various areas that we need to consider, and accordingly, we need to discuss with a lot of stakeholders, and we need enormous amount of a budget. And I will say our current ODA is not enough. If you think about China and Japan that spends millions and millions of dollars on the ODA for other countries. So to secure efficiency and effectiveness of ODA, first, what we need to review is maybe first we need to decide the core countries with the priority cooperation areas. And we want to pursue strategic project. Let's say K-quarantine model. So instead of simply providing some equipment or some diagnosis kit, we can also promote Korea-made app, and the NGO can be beneficial. So we can create some bridging projects as a whole package. And that's one core element of our plan, and my institute is also working on it. Let's say we are creating and we want to create a smart city, and we can add some high added value industry and ICT industry, BRT, and establishing smart cities can be all realized in more integrated manner. And as a strategic package, we can create more projects in a consistent and cohesive context while including private sectors and civil organizations, and that's something that we can think of to develop the current ODA. In terms of current economic cooperation, it could be more inclusive, working with the locals, and by responding local needs, by utilizing the local natural resources, and that way we can focusing on certain things more. So you can also imagine that COICA, Ministry of Planning and Strategy all have a different scheme, and they all have a different plans. And that's probably why, even though they invested enormous amount of budget and resources, we haven't had a great impact of the ODA from individual organizations. And usually organizations pay attention to what they are confident of, but they haven't really done any landmark level of a project that can actually and practically help some ODA recipients. And we have had a lot of limitations learned. So the basic direction of a ODA should be creating, package projects with some bridging subcategory. So at the end of the day, ODA is risk sharing. So instead of wasting money and having no results, the government, private sectors, and civil organizations can share risk if we can see even a little potential of the result of this ODA projects. We can think of some bottom-up projects, but we can also think of some top-down, maybe like a various Mekong River projects, to connect them more meaningful and more organic way. That's how we can elicit, by working with private sectors and civil organizations, by sharing some risks. And we need to establish a system to work with the civil organizations and private sectors.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I think we are on time, and thank you very much for our participants, making this seminar to be fruitful, interesting, and engaging party concern. So now let me move to closing remark, right? Okay.
네, 우리 또이따릿 3세션
Now,
모더레이팅 해주신 것.
thank you. I'd like to thank you for moderating the session 3. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us all day. It has been a very fruitful and informative seminar. Now we are about to close the ASEAN Center in BFS. I'd like to invite the closing remarks. Before I'd like to invite Director Bae-Yang-soo for the closing remarks. It's been a long day from the early in the morning and to this time. I really admire your passion, former Ambassador Jung Hae-yoon and President Kim Hong-gu. And I'm also grateful to all Director Jung. I'm also grateful to international speakers. Tony Darit, labor attaché of Royal Embassy of Cambodia in Seoul. And I'd like to thank President Kim Hong-jong, Professor Hong Moon-suk, and Professor Kim Hyung-jun. And most of all, I'm grateful to all the officials who have made this event possible. Mr. Chung Jun-ho, Mr. Kim Bo-sung, and Mr. Han Sung-kyung, Bang Yeon-sung, Kim Na-yeon. Thank you. And my thanks goes to staff members. Finally, I'm so grateful to the two translators, and I'm grateful to Lotte Hotel for providing us with beverages. Thank you.
Thank you ครับ
예. 우리 저희는 몇은 어제 왔어요. 수고하셨습니다. 예. 수고하셨습니다. 고맙습니다. 수고하시고 코로나고. 네. 그래. 뭐 제가 좀